Hi, and welcome to the ARC podcast. My name is Jen Powers-Algie, and I'm your host. And I'm here today talking to Johanna Ward. She is the administrator at the Office for Exceptional Children. And I have Kari Jones, who is the Chief Strategy Officer at the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. So thank you both for coming on the ARC of Ohio podcast today. I really want our folks who listen to learn more about what we're doing in Ohio for special education and kind of maybe help them feel like maybe all the mess that's happening at the federal level isn't going to harm our children here at the state level because we have you ladies in charge and looking out for our kids. So,
Thank you so much for inviting us. We are so happy to be here and partner with you all at the ARC of Ohio. Johanna Ward, and I lead the Office for Exceptional Children. And our office provides supports to educational agencies across the state of Ohio and to families and to educators to support implementing the federal IDEA law. So we have a variety of resources, tools, and most importantly, partnerships with agencies and organizations in school districts and family organizations across the state of Ohio.
Great. Kari, tell us about yourself. I'm so excited that you're there. I know you from all kinds of different advocacy that we've done over the years.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. As you know, Jen, but maybe some of the listeners do not, I have spent the majority of my career in the disability advocacy space on behalf and alongside families and people with developmental disabilities. So I'm very excited to step into my role here. It's only been a few months so far, but it's been incredible to work with so many passionate advocates, even internally within the walls of our office downtown in Columbus, but also with partners across all of Ohio, in every facet, every corner of Ohio, who I think authentically care about students with disabilities and how we can continue to improve and do more to serve those students.
Yeah, so Kari and I both have loved ones with Down syndrome. Everybody knows about my daughter Evie, who's 13. Can you believe she's a teenager now?
Yeah.
13-year-old. But Kari, tell us about your brother.
Yeah. I am a sibling first, and for any of the sibs out there, we all know it's like I'm Alex's sister. We could have probably just started with that as my introduction. Alex is 40, so he's been out of the school system for some time, but growing up, I watched my parents advocate on his behalf. The earliest memory I have is ensuring that he went to the same elementary school I did. This was decades ago, but still something that I know some families have to navigate today. And I think watching my parents' advocacy instilled that appetite that I now have for continuing on with that legacy. My dad was on the school board for basically the entire time we were in school. I think and I know it sounds like you've recently had a podcast talking about the power of school board leadership that advocates on behalf of students with disabilities, which is incredible and something I saw firsthand within my family dynamics and how that impacted inclusion for my brother throughout his school experience. So yeah, personally, I have lived alongside, which means learning alongside my brother and my family through advocacy journeys of all sorts of nature. And so I'm excited to be here in this role and continue through a new way to make sure that we're honoring what students with disabilities and what their families need.
Yeah. Well, thank you both. I appreciate your time. I know you guys are so busy, but I'm getting a lot of calls from families about the cuts to the Department of Education. And we're just wondering if there's like any oversight happening at the federal level, which it appears there really isn't since there's been just so many cuts. And I'm wondering, hopefully you're getting more information about this at your level and what these cuts mean For our state and for our folks here in special education. Can you maybe talk about that a little bit, Johanna?
Sure, yeah. Well, at this point, as you all know, like the federal government shutdown has ended. So everyone's back to work. And we at all states have a state lead at the federal government. That's who we connect with and talk to and who advises and supports us. And we have been in touch with our state lead. So our state lead is there, reinstated. We have monthly meetings with our state lead, and I've had emails coming since the shutdowns ended. Everyone seems to be back to work. Let's say it that way.
Yeah, great.
So, and here's the other thing: like I've said this across the state, over the shutdown and before. IDEA is a federal law. It's still a federal law. Like the law did not go away, right? So we in our agency and our office have been and will continue to support the implementation of IDEA. That's it.
Yeah.
And all our educators out there and all our families and administrators that are leading schools and educational agencies are continuing to support the implementation of services and supports for students on IEPs.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
we
I think,
discussed, yeah, go ahead, Kari.
oh, go ahead. I was just going to say, I think everything that Johanna just said is accurate and true. And also there is a lot of confusion and I think rightfully so, meaning families couldn't possibly be up to speed. We're in roles in which we are, it's a part of our job to be kept up to speed with these changes. And that's certainly not the case for the majority of families. And so that's just one of the reasons that we're really grateful. This is a very timely conversation with the recent changes. And when you're in a position as a family where you're really thinking about making sure you're getting the outpatient speech, or you're doubling down on extra time for math homework, or you're doing all the reading and sitting alongside your child to do all of that enrichment outside of school that we all know is so valuable and important. It's you must not be able to sleep if you were able to keep up with all of the the policy changes and everything that's happening. And so the great news is that what Johanna said is that we really are getting back to it is going to look a little different federally, but really that's should not affect things stateside for families. And so that's really the big takeaway.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked a couple podcasts ago to Courtney Hansen about the changes. And even since then, it's been like 2 weeks. And we had the shutdown, of course, but even a couple of days ago, so we're recording on the 20th, on the 18th, the White House announced that they're transferring some of their programs to all over to different agencies across the federal government. And a couple of those agencies really affect our kids. All of them do, but a couple of them very much so. It's OSAP is where all that oversight is, and we're kind of worried that's going to somehow be transferred to the Department of HHS. And so we're kind of watching that. And there are some things that we can do on the federal side to advocate against that. It's not a done deal. They really can't do much. They can't shut down the, Department of Education without Congress being involved. So I think we all need to continue to advocate on the federal level. But in talking to our folks at these disability rights groups like National Down Syndrome Congress or the ARC National Office, that oversight really is a worry. And I want to know how Ohio is prepared for that and how Ohio can provide that oversight and how parents can know that that is still happening, even if it's not happening at the federal level.
Most state agencies, I would say probably all state agencies, at least in Ohio, we all have like internal auditors, basically. That's, we have internal risk assessment systems in place. So all of us as state agencies want to make sure that we're operating at the most optimal level to serve Ohioans. Like that's why we exist. So there already are internal controls set up to ensure that all our offices are doing the work that we're expected to be doing. So we have internal processes, and taking from that, our office is working on supporting districts with setting up their own internal monitoring systems. So we have some resources for that on our website. We have some like webinars and some LMS modules, those are learning management system modules and things for educational agencies to set up their own internal processes, right? Excuse me. Everyone really wants to be operating at the most optimal level. And so these systems help set that up so that we can have some check and balances. And then of course, we always want to hear from others, like what is missing, if something's missing, right? Or if something's doesn't have enough attention to it, like let us know and we will do what we can to turn attention to the void or a gap.
Yeah.
Kari?
And I think adding to that, one of the things that has really struck me about the DeWine Trestle administration is just truly their steadfast commitment to ensuring that all students, including students with disabilities, receive the necessary protections and support that they need to reach their fullest potential. That's one of the reasons, just on a personal note, I was drawn to come to the department, because they don't just say it, they really want to act on that and really illustrate that through in many, many ways. So I know that doesn't always, families want to know more, like, what does that mean? But I think Johanna just illustrated a few examples of what that looks like here in Ohio. And the commitment has been consistent from this administration that they want to ensure that all the necessary protections are in place, like I said, for students in order to help them reach their fullest potential.
I agree. I always think like the kids are going to be okay with the changes, but I worry like, especially with our kids, like education just so important to their independence and their adulthood and finding a job and being employable. I worry about, some of these changes, and I am not as worried about Ohio because I know a lot about Ohio as opposed to other states. I am really worried about other states, to be honest with you. But I will say the one thing I worry about in Ohio is that kind of the inequity of education across different places in Ohio. So like what I see in my job is we're okay in our bigger districts, in the cities and like our like big suburbs, and in my rural parts of Ohio that I help, it's like going to a foreign land sometimes. Like it's a totally different situation with lots less resources, and we're kind of behind. So I'm wondering if we don't have the oversight, maybe from the federal level, and maybe that's okay because we're having that oversight at the state level, how can we ensure that our rural districts, maybe if even like funding is cut, or if we're not getting like full funding because of all these shifts in funding at the federal level, how can we ensure that our rural districts are getting what they need for the students with special education service needs?
If I can start
Yes.
here, like one of the things that while we see the state as a whole from a state agency, we also have a regional structure in place. So we have regional state support teams across the state of Ohio, and that breaks up the state into right now 16 different regions for the effort of us getting to those particular regions and the necessary supports and resources that they need, right? Because like you said, all aspects of Ohio are not the same. We have 8 big cities in Ohio, and that's unusual for many states don't have that. They might have 1 or 2. And then we have a plethora of rural small districts, a lot of charter schools, community schools. We have a lot of great educational options across the state of Ohio, which is wonderful for all our families and children. So with that, with our regional structure, we can deploy from the state effort, all kinds of resources, supports, tools that way. We have education service centers as well, who we have a great partnership with. So we deploy actively resources and supports to different areas based on, again, what we're seeing as needs and our relationships with those areas. We have Ocali, which is a state treasure, I would say,
Yep.
and they also help us deploy necessary resources and support. So in some areas where you might have maybe one like algebra teacher for for a whole like county, right? There are structured resources coming to them. There's ways that we are working as a state to bring those siloed, separated kind of people together. So one thing we have started a few years ago, we support bringing together communities of practice. So we are working with different educational partners, associations, and organizations to create like mentoring spaces and communities of practice, mostly to get at what you're saying. One, to build like a repository of good resources, tools, and supports and help connect people to that, and to bring people together who are isolated in isolated places so they have a community to bend to and to connect with and to grow with. So we work with the Ohio Council for Exceptional Children, Ohio CEC, and they help us with providing mentorship and organization for intervention specialists, special ed teachers across the state of Ohio. And I was just talking to them earlier today, and we have 20 rural districts that are involved in that. So there's intervention specialists coming from these 20 different rural spaces into that space. And now they get to benefit from others across the state, and they have a mentor, and they have access to resources through the state, through CEC. So it's a structure that's like deployed from, you know, like the state level, but it's getting down into the classroom, right? And a teacher level, and really providing support. We have that same structure set up with school psychs, school social workers, speech language pathologists, school nurses. So we've expanded that approach to getting into all areas of the state, really, and setting up these communities of practice. And then annually, we bring all those partners together so that they can talk to each other and learn from each other and how they've engaged, how they've set up these communities and shared resources and supports. And then they can talk about how they work together as a team, because we know like education for a student with disabilities is not one person. There's not just one person probably educating the students. There's multiple, there's a whole team of people. So bringing together teams is important for us too, so that they can talk about how each delivery of service can provide a continuum of support for a student and capitalize on each other's, right? So they're not separate, discrete things that are happening for a student, but they're capitalizing on the synergy of all the pieces and supports that come together. So those are some things I think we have going on.
Good. And I see
Just
it
a
in
few
my
things.
practice too. I see
It's
it.
a lot of things.
It is a lot of things, but I see it because I sit at those tables, especially at some of the more, difficult meetings, and we have like a full table of all these experts, and it's great. I do think we still have some issues in those little places because it's great to sit around that table and to bring those perspectives, but then I need those people to like stay with that student and like be there in real time when the real is happening, especially when we have some behaviors and different, things that are happening that are preventing inclusion, which is really important for our students. But I do think I've seen just the wealth of information, and like you're right that it does help with having experts there that can ensure that everybody has the same knowledge base, at least. We're all dealing kind of from the same level. But yeah, it's tough to ensure that our kids in like more rural districts are getting what they need, just because there's such a lack of resource. And I'll say that kind of goes into my next question is, when you're in that small town, there's nowhere else to go. So it's like public school or nothing, and Ohio, we're kind of going toward this, private school. A lot of funds are going to private school. Um, Public schools are struggling. Now we're trying to like change our property tax law, so we're going to even be in a more tough place to try to raise funds for public schools. So when you have these places that have no other option, I feel like our kids, the kids with developmental disabilities, are the ones that hurt the most. We're the most vulnerable because our kids we don't have school choice. Like our choice is public school or driving an hour away and maybe going to some kind of like segregated option that I really sometimes they're great. And then, we need some of these options, but I'm not thrilled about, where that goes. And I really would rather our public schools be where they need to be. So can you talk a little bit about, that was a big, long question. That wasn't really a question. It was just me on my soapbox. But I worry a lot about what we're doing to public school with these lack of funds from both of our state and the federal level. And what can we do as advocates to help ensure that our schools have the funding that they need? Should we show up at our school board meetings? Is there a way to ensure that, the state, or maybe we should be talking to certain representatives in our state house? What would you recommend?
If we can just go back a minute,
Please.
I didn't want to interrupt you because you had a beautiful, eloquent, and I have a tendency to interrupt, so I was trying really hard. But the piece going back to rural families, I do want to say, and this is a little of an homage to my previous role, but we do have a great partner in Learning Aid Ohio that offers tutoring services to families across all corners of Ohio, all 88 counties, in which families with students on an IEP, there are a couple of other requirements, but by and large, we've heard from families that they really value that it's not an exorbitant amount of hoops to jump through in order to become active within Learning Aid Ohio's model. And that's a great, from my previous work in that role and then seeing some of that on the other side here, I think that's a great resource that not all families even know about. And so it's been operating for 5 years now, almost exactly. And it's a great resource for families in which I think some of that mental load of navigating education supports outside of school is lifted. Because I know personally, with my daughter who's on an IEP, I don't know how to break down math instruction in a way that is helpful to her. I in school can trust her team, but outside of school, we both end up crying.
Yeah.
And so I can't say enough about resources like that. I think there are many resources on local level, of course, depending on where you live, but that's one that's available across all of Ohio. So I think it's relevant for this conversation today. And I don't know when this will air, but I think registration is open right now for the upcoming thing. Again, not a plug for anyone else, but it's just another thing that I think is helpful. And sometimes we have these beautiful things that exist, and half of the awareness is really just helping distill down for families what they're eligible for and what it is. And so I think that's where we have to work collaboratively with partners like you to even just talk about those resources that exist, because it can feel really daunting to try and navigate all of that on your own. So I don't want to take away from your other question, but I want to make sure that we're capturing that for this conversation.
I think that's a really good point, because I think we do get focused, and I do, and I get kind of thrown off by what's going on because it's just a constant barrage of different policy changes, things going on and all of this stuff affects my kids,
Yeah.
and the kids that I serve. So it is very difficult to remain focused on like what we can do, practically speaking. And so thank you for bringing that up, because I do think a lot of times I'm sitting in a meeting with families and I'm just so down about things. And I'm like, you know what? Let's just start from scratch. What do we need? What are the unmet needs? How can we fix those? Let's just go from there. And I do genuinely believe, like I just talked to a district the other day, and they were like, nobody on my team got into this work, to try to do anything but help kids with developmental disabilities learn. Like that's the key to remember. And I do genuinely believe that. Even my advocacy lawyer mind, who kind of wants to fight sometimes, does go back to that a lot, because from my own personal experience, and I'm sure you feel this too, Kari, that fighting is there. You have these tools to file due process or file a state complaint. But really, what you want to do is make sure your kids are okay daily in school and
Yeah.
make sure that they're learning. And it's great to have those tools. And I'm so thankful that we have the IDEA, because the law is on our side on these things. But at the end of the day, you have to be on an IEP team with folks doing the work, for your child to learn on a daily basis. And so
Yeah.
that's most of my job. 99% of my job is just to make sure the team is all on the same page and that we're all working together to help the child succeed. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I do think we do want to hear from Arc of Ohio, from Elevated, from Down syndrome associations, from autism societies, from all these family organizations. Like we want to hear what families need. I think we have to make sure that we're collectively pulling all that information together so that it's not anecdotal in the sense that it could be quantified. I know certain things you can't do that, but we want to hear from families, and that is one of, again, one of the reasons that I'm so excited to step into this role is that that's an important thing that we are working to elevate, is making sure that we're taking what families have to say and we are acting on that. In terms of figuring out ways to, whatever those needs are that are being communicated to us, we're figuring out how to solve that together. And Johanna's been doing that for a long time. And so I'm not saying it isn't something we have been focused on, because we have, but we want to find new ways to continue to hear from families so that we can continue to be collaborative partners in solving whatever the breaking down barriers might look like, or whatever that could be, because we can have ideas of what we think is going to be helpful, but we really don't know unless we're hearing from families that, yeah, that's a good idea or not, or here's what we think. And so that's where I think we need partners like the Arc of Ohio and family organizations that come together. And we have other great partners too. We have many different avenues, but the more the better.
Yeah.
For that, because that's the whole reason we're here.
Yeah.
That's why we do this work.
Yeah, Johanna, do
So
you feel like this is the 50th anniversary of the IDEA, or what became before the IDEA, and the IDEA, those principles have been in practice for 50 years. What are you worried about funding? It's never really been fully funded anyway. So are we worried that that funding is being threatened at this point if the funds are going to come in some sort of block grant to states? Do you worry about that at all, or how that would affect our families?
No, no. So it might be like, it sounds like, when you hear the big number from the federal level about all the money, but in reality, when you look at our state, like the federal money that comes in, it's a small portion of what we really use to operate. So we're lucky in Ohio that our state legislature, our governor, our administration here, we have put a lot of funds from state funds, and then there's local funds that come into play. So the majority of the funds that are supporting students out there are state and local dollars. I mean, our federal funds are very small percentage of all of that. And I think, Kari will talk about this in a second, but I think our agency is also positioning itself to organize around how do we build upon the synergy of all the things in our department and our agency to support students with disabilities, right? So it's not just one office, we're the main office, but it really takes all the offices, right? It takes all of us to do something. So we're all chiming in there. But the legislatures put a lot of funding into it. We have a whole special education enhancement line in the state budget. One of those lines is the parent mentors. So money for parent mentors, supporting families out there across the state of Ohio and really helping them navigate the whole special education space, in serving as a liaison and a communicator and a support between a district and our educational agency and a parent and a family. So, the legislature supported that for 30 years now. Like, that's amazing, right? So I don't have that worry. I feel like we're in a good spot in Ohio.
Okay, good.
With the support all the way up to the top, to the state house.
And I do think, Jen, this goes back to, and I am a family member. I have all the respect in the world for families. They could not possibly keep up with the intricacies of the funding of our system, much less sometimes all that's available. But the funding mechanisms behind all of that is complex. And so I hope it is a relief for families that are listening to hear that our legislature, Governor DeWine, Director Dakin, again, they're ensuring that Ohio has the funds available to support the implementation of IDEA, which is the predominant component to that funding is stateside.
And I don't know if I had this in my questions, but one of the worries I have is just the lack of like special education, like teachers or majors, like coming through schools. Does Ohio do anything to like incentivize people to become special education teachers? Or is there anything that we can do as advocates to work on some kind of legislation or something that'll help my current one of my providers from my son is a special education major, and I'm like, okay, tell me about your your friends and why did you choose this and how did you, like, and I like she's the perfect person to do it because she has so much experience with people with disabilities. So I'm like, this is great. How can we get more people in that field? And is that true that it is kind of like a worry that we don't have enough?
We'll have more to share.
Oh, good.
I think on the road ahead, but Johanna, you could probably speak more to some
Yeah.
of the things that are already in place now.
So already in place, the mentoring program that I talked about earlier, like with the Ohio Council for Exceptional Children, that is really designed to not only provide supports in areas where people are isolated, but the premise behind it is that we don't want people to leave, right, as well.
Right.
So we knew we've done a survey to educators across the state. We surveyed over 7,000. We had 7,000 responses to our survey from educators. And, being isolated, not having supports and resources, not having the tools available led to them just wanting to walk away from the field, right? From the work. So putting that mentoring program in place has really provided support so that we're able to retain. We've been working with, for the intervention specialist program anyways, we've been working with them about 4 years now. And they've had anywhere from 80, 75 new educators involved in that program. And we have over a 95% retention rate with those teachers that are part of that. So we're filling a space there that we know is a need based on survey data and talking to teachers, that by helping them feel connected, part of the community, have the right resources, supports, helps them feel successful and stay in their job. Just like you said earlier, though, like, we're here to support families and children and students. That's why we're here. We want to see that we can do that. We can make an impact and be successful. So that's one thing. We're trying to really grow in that space. And I think Kari said there'll be some things coming in the future. So hopefully you can invite us back and we can talk about those as they come to life.
Absolutely. I'd love to. That's great.
And
Yeah, go ahead, Kari.
I don't know how we're doing on time, Jen, but I did want to bring up, we've added to our department's name and workforce
Yes.
as a component of who we are. So I think if it's okay, we'd be a bit remiss. I know this is a lot about what we're doing stateside, and I think this fits right in with that. And we haven't gotten there yet. But I do want to note that as we look at even with the piece around workforce, we're also looking at students with disabilities in that space too. I'm not sure since you're down that way, but we're working to lift up exemplars of practice like UC IDD program. I don't know how familiar you are with that, but it's post-secondary, and I think it's a partnership post-secondary with high school, and they're really looking at a curriculum that's designed to train students with disabilities for high demand careers. And I'm really excited about that. I mean, as someone who spent my career in the disability space thinking about what comes next after graduation, it's really exciting to me what we're seeing in terms of innovation developing here in Ohio. And it makes me very proud as a family member and an advocate to see us evolve in that way and in that space now. It's not just a word or two added to the end of our department. It's we are a partner in building out that workforce among other state agencies. And so I'm very thrilled to see that development in terms of inclusion of students with disabilities in that space too, in high demand career fields, which is something that I think some families may be encouraged to hear. And like you said, there's a lot of in the media right now, a lot of doom and gloom and just really a lot of angst and confusion sometimes, and just there's a lot out there. So I tend to be a person and that tries to hang on to the glimmers of the things that I'm excited to see. And I know it's not something that everybody sees yet, but there are these developments in these spaces in Ohio, and we want to continue to push those out to the broader communities across Ohio, because I do think that people with disabilities, students with disabilities, have so much to offer. And we want to have that all the way through their K-12 experience and beyond. So I just,
like you.
Thanks for letting me.
No, please. I'm so glad you went there. I'm like, and I only have one question left for you both, but I'm with you that I would rather look for the opportunity and the silver lining and all the craziness. And so that's why I'm just really focused on Ohio and what's happening here at the local level and what the advocates that I work with can do in their own communities. I think that's really important. I think also my husband and I are saving like all of our money to send our kids to that UC program right now, because it is a really great program, and the people who run it are phenomenal, and it really is like a best in practice, like that. I just think they are doing a really great job. I will say it's expensive for a lot of families. It's not an option for a lot of families. So hint, hint, we need more like funding for those kind of programs, especially when they're working really well like that one is. So like my last question for you both is inclusion. So the promise of the IDEA is inclusion for our kids. And that goes with the promise of our kids also like living in the community when they're adults, making sure that they have everything that they need in order to live their best life in the community. So I want you both to just touch on, how we can continue to ensure that that principle of inclusion remains a priority here in Ohio, and maybe a couple things of like what you're excited about in the future for the next year. Johanna,
Wow,
start with you.
That's two heavy hitter questions.
Those are a lot.
Yeah.
Well, so in Ohio, we have about 269,000 students on IEPs in K-12, and the majority of them, more than 75-80% of those students are being educated in the general education curriculum. So, and that's been the case in our state data. If you look at our data, that's been the case for well over 20 years. Like, it has been something that Ohio should be proud of, that we've been focused on. What we're doing new in that space, what we're doing different, is really thinking about how we get down to that instruction level and what is happening in the instruction in that space. So there's things happening at the state level, like we've realigned kind of how we operate internally so that we can really get into pairing what is specially designed instruction, what are those accommodations and modifications in the delivery of literacy and math and science and whatever the content is. So we're really partnering with the other offices to make sure we can get into that space of what that looks like with both things happening at once. So it's not a separate thing. It's not, let's talk about content and instruction in science of reading, and then let's talk about special education separately. We're talking about how those things come together and go together and are delivered together seamlessly. So we're doing that internally. And then that also resonates throughout like our regional structure and then down to schools. So we're seeing more and more of that happening in that case. We're excited about that. Like there's some great things happening in that space that I think we're going to see major benefits from. And I don't, Kari, if you want to add to any of that.
Yeah, I mean that like integrated multi-tiered system of supports is something we want to be mirroring internally here at 25 South Front, and also supporting districts in that framework through and really all LEAs throughout all of Ohio. So I think, you know, we want to make sure that there's a framework that really is taking a look at data informed academic and non-academic instruction, and really to better support all students. And so we're really excited about that. It's not brand new, but it's newer, and we're going to be talking about it more. Spoiler. And so I think what that really means in a nutshell for families that are like, there's a lot of words here, is it means collaboration, like very intentional collaboration. And so I think whenever I'm a huge fan of collaborating, I think that when we recognize that we all have a shared goal and come together, that's what creates that meaningful change. We use the word advocacy, but I think that could also be pretty synonymous with change, positive change. And so when, you know, I think sometimes there are lots of acronyms, lots of letters, lots of big words, but we're behind collaboration across many levels, across sectors, even, in order to ensure that we're delivering for all Ohio students, and with a specific emphasis on students with disabilities.
Yeah. And I would add to that, like the whole integrated multi-tier system of support structure. If you've been like following along with us the last 6 years, our office went out on an adventure to have voice from the field, right? So we did that 7,000 teacher survey. We did town hall meetings. We talked to students. We just went out to set up our plan for what are we going to do better in Ohio to deliver special education across the state. The number one thing that came out of all of that and all the work that we did on that plan was that the state needed a multi-tier system of support structure. Mm-hmm. So back to what Kari was saying, what does that mean? That means, how are the educators and families collaborating and working together? What is the design of providing supports to the right student at the right time when they need it, right? What's the intensity of those supports and those accommodations and modifications, and for any student, right? Not only students with IEPs, but for all our students in Ohio, so we can get stronger together. So that's exciting. We're in a space now where we're bringing that to life.
Yeah.
And I love a town hall. I loved when you did that. I was a part of one of those. I think it's really, really important to always be out there. If you're not, the only time we all, face with the department often is when there's like a conflict. And so I think it's great to come forward and say, like, what do you need? And here's what we're doing. So like anytime you can do a town hall, we'd love to have you at the ARC, and we know that you guys are always coming to our conferences and giving us updates. So we appreciate those. And Kari, I'll give you the last word. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that inclusion is really important. And I think you hit the nail on the head. That is a promise of IDEA. But I would push that we should all be striving one step further, which is belonging. And we talk a lot about that, but that to me is the pinnacle. As an advocate and again, being a family member myself, it's not just that my brother, who now lives in the community, lives in the community. So not just in the community of the community, that framing of how you look at it is, does he talk to his neighbors? Does he get invited to the block parties? Does he have people looking out for him? Is he saying hello to their cats, and they're coming out on a nice day and chatting it up with him. Those are the things that I think if you flip that to on the educational side, that's really what I think families are yearning for. And we agree with that and share that same sentiment. So I think inclusion is wildly important. And belonging is really where I hope we're all really aiming our sights.
Perfect. Kari, that was beautiful. I had like little chills when you said that because I think we're all in this space of like anxiety, like you said, and that makes me feel relief to know that you're both there fighting for belonging. Because I think that's a step above, like you said, that's a step above inclusion. So I'm really
Yeah.
glad you work where you do, especially
You
having
have a
over there, Kari. I think it's
great
important. Yes. So thank you both for your time. I appreciate you both, and we'll have you back on the ARC podcast anytime you want. So let us know what's happening.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you, Jen.